attending this session this morning. We'll try to make it an hour full of fun and adventure. My name is Joe Freddoso. I'm President and CEO of MCNC. MCNC used to stand for the Microelectronics Center of North Carolina. It is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1980 to do technology, economic development, and networking in North Carolina. For about the first 15 years, we were really a heavily based research organization. We did research in microelectronics and networking. Part of the reason why it was crafted was the administration at the time, the state's administration at the time, the General Assembly, the university system, wanted to attract General Electric's first chip-making plant to research Triangle Park in the late 70s and early 80s. And one of the things that GE wanted, GE was going to focus on optics and chips in the optical space and in microelectronics. And one of the things that GE wanted was an independent research organization that would produce intellectual property in the networking and chip-making space that they could help the state of North Carolina commercialize. And at that point in time, universities weren't really doing a lot of high-end research that could be taken from the development bench and put into a product. So it was decided to fund a separate research organization, create a nonprofit, and begin that work. At MCNC's peak during those days, the research phase of the organization was really 1980 to 2000. We had about 76 PhD level researchers, produced a patent portfolio of about 125 patents, and spun off 7 companies. So it was really active in the commercial space, drawing down federal funding for grants and things like that. The state appropriation over time for the research effort reduced from about $14 million down to about $3 million or so by 1995, between 1980 and 1995, and the organization became more and more self-sufficient. One of the things that happened is that between 1980 and 1995, the universities, particularly our Research One universities in North Carolina, NC State, Duke, and Chapel Hill, really upgraded their research capabilities in the physical sciences, in technology, and in computer science. And from the period of about 1995 to 99 or so, MCNC was actually competing with the Research One universities for research dollars at the federal level. So the General Assembly decided that that wasn't a good situation. They were going to draw down MCNC's research funds and put those into the universities. And MCNC gradually got out of the research business. One thing happened on the way to getting out of the research business is that MCNC spun off a company called Kronos. Kronos was an optical chip manufacturing company and had a patented technology to allow optical chips to refract a light at a much faster rate, a factor of 5 or 6 than what the existing technologies would allow. And JDS Uniphase, which is an optical chip manufacturing company in Silicon Valley, bought Kronos for about $700 million in 1999. MCNC had about 28% share of JDS Uniphase after they spun it out. So about $250 million or so came back to MCNC. And it's one of the few nonprofits, actually, that gave the state a return on its investment that they had made over time. MCNC dedicated $30 million out of those proceeds to start the Rural Internet Access Authority. So Jane Patterson's organization got its start with funding from MCNC. About $50 million went to a nonprofit venture fund called NCIDIA that's still in existence today, and it gives grants to tech and biotech companies mainly in the Triangle area, but statewide. They give about $3 million worth of grants away a year and help those companies in that kind of mezzanine level of funding that the Triangle in North Carolina has difficulty attracting venture funds. So. And they also align with Keenan Flagler and with Fuqua so that at the same time those companies get help. And then the second phase of MCNC's business was, we started this very small, but in order to do network research, you actually have to create a network. Who knew? And MCNC started very small by networking with owned fiber, Duke State and Chapel Hill. and allowing them to do large data transfer. We had the first production gigapop in the world between the three universities, and we've owned fiber between those three universities for a long period of time. Somewhere along the way in the early and mid-90s, it was decided that having a fiber-based network that served all the universities and the university systems, and Bill Friday had a lot to do with this, God rest his soul now, was a good idea. They could share content with one another. They could move into a world that was increasingly distributed for research, and we could serve a lot of production needs and aggregate demand. And you all understand this in the jobs that you're in. If Western Carolina goes and makes an internet agreement on their own, if Western Carolina University goes and makes an internet agreement on their own, there's a heavy capital cost to meeting Western, to getting the feed to Western. And your internet rate's going to have to absorb that. Tracy Seri's here today from AT&T. The last I checked, AT&T's is not a nonprofit, at least not on purpose in most lines of business that they're in. So if we try to get heavy bandwidth to Western or to Boone, or on the other side to Elizabeth City, the client's going to have to, at some point in time, absorb the cost of that capital to get there. So what the state was saying is that, through MCNC, through this nonprofit, we'll create a network, put everybody on the same backbone intranet network, and then we'll aggregate our buy of internet out of Charlotte and Raleigh so that we can get good prices. And we think that the cost of operating the backbone network we'll get a heavy return on that investment because our internet rates will go down. And that's exactly what happened over time. That's exactly what happened over time. So there was a lot of vision in the early 80s all the way through the mid-90s about how North Carolina would position itself in this space. And that kind of brings you up to what I'll talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is just where we are today. The networking business is our sole work. And you'll see who's connected to the network today. You'll see some of the issues that we faced long term. And then you'll see where we're going to go in hopefully in the near and long-term future. But a couple things before I get started. I read this morning. I thought it was important because at 10:18, the FEMA is sponsoring something called the Great Shakeout. And we're all supposed to do earthquake preparedness at 10:18 a.m. And here's their instructions to us. We're supposed to drop to the ground. You're supposed to take cover under a sturdy desk or table. I read this morning, I swear. And we're supposed to all hold on until the shaking stops. So it sounds like our jobs every day. I don't know about you, but I'm still underneath the table and I'm still holding on. And I don't think 10:18 is going to make a difference. No, I don't expect that we're going to follow this, but I did want you to know that it's the Great Shakeout Day. And it's the first I'd heard of it. I got an alert this morning. I'm on a Department of Homeland Security feed, and this is what I got this morning. So if anybody drops under the table at 10:18, I'll know what's going on, and I won't be distracted, so don't worry. We have 8 minutes. 8 minutes to prepare. I think it's the first 30. So I mentioned that we operate an infrastructure. We call that infrastructure the North Carolina Research and Education Network, or NCREN, and it mainly serves what we deem, or we call, community anchor institutions, with both their intranet services, so in-state transport, and then their external-facing or internet bandwidth, and that includes access to the advanced research networks. So the national research backbones, internet to National Lambda Rail, National Transit Rail, we have peering with all of those networks in place. Community anchor institutions, by our definition, are nonprofit healthcare and public health. They are schools, libraries, and when I use schools, I mean K through 20. Public safety is included in the federal definition, as are state, county, and local government. And we have parts of all of those on the network today. This is our community today. We serve the 17 institutions of the UNC system. One of the interesting things is that in the enabling legislation for the network, Duke and Wake Forest are considered part of the UNC system in our vernacular. It's probably the only place where Duke and UNC are included in the University of North Carolina system. We serve all 58 North Carolina community colleges, all 115 LEAs, and When we started the process of connecting the LEAs, Sharon will tell you that there were probably about 600 or so schools that didn't have fiber-based connections. Today, that number is somewhere in the range of 100. So not only have we run 100 gig circuits to every LEA central office, but that's caused a lot of upgrades to happen within the district. A lot more E-rate money is flowing, and I'll get into that in a minute, to North Carolina. So schools that were not fiber-based before are becoming fiber-based. And I'll give you an example from right out here. Tracy's company benefited from this. When I first came to MCNC 5 years ago, Mitchell County Schools was basically running on a wireless LAN in a wide area. And it was an unreliable wireless LAN. Brock Womble was the superintendent. He was also the tech director. I think he cut grass and did other things in addition to his other jobs. He's a great guy. But it was just a highly unreliable wireless network. For about 4 months, there was a period of time where Brock's cell phone was the emergency phone for the district because they were running voice over this unreliable wireless network, and it would go down all the time. Through the Connectivity Initiative, we were able to dedicate funds to put Mitchell County Schools on a fiber-based network. So I think there's 8 schools, Jeremiah knows for sure, but I think there's 8 schools in the district, and now they're on a fiber-based network that AT&T engineered and installed for. So this dedication to kind of connectivity across K through 20 has really been a great thing, and I'll give you some stats in a minute that will show you. We also have 36 charter schools on the network. There's a lot of growing interest in charter schools and connecting to the backbone. And then we're into healthcare through great partners like AT&T, Time Warner, and CenturyLink, who supply local bandwidth to us. We've connected 23 nonprofit hospitals, and with our partner in state ITS, about 61 public health agencies and free clinics. So we've gone from probably about 50 endpoints in 2007 to about 400 today. Right. And this is the way we kind of work, okay? We kind of sit in the middle of a connectivity ecosystem. We rely on AT&T, Time Warner Cable, and CenturyLink to provide last-mile circuits from POP locations around the state to get to those endpoints. Most of the universities are POPs, or have near POPs. We went for a long period of time of putting POPs on the universities, and unfortunately, when you rely on them for shore power, they don't really understand a wide area network, so they'll cut down power to the building that you have the POP in. And that lasted until about 2000, and then we said, it doesn't make sense anymore. So we have separate huts with DC power and all those things, usually for the POP locations, or they're off campus. And then we look at, so that's how we get locally. You know, we basically create the network in the middle mile network in the middle. And then to get to the internet, our internet connections are with AT&T Quest and Level 4. So we buy about 60 gig of internet with external facing. And that's in addition to 10 gig links to NLR, National Lambda Rail, and Internet 2. So it's a very robust infrastructure, and it's one that aggregates a lot of traffic from all those anchor institutions. We spend about $9 million a year in fiscal year 12 on local circuits and internet bandwidth. So we're a big customer of the carriers. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is, you know, when we started with K through 12, and Sharon will tell you because she was involved in the conversation, when we said we were going to deliver a 100 meg circuit to every LEA, people looked at us like we were crazy. You know, because most of the LEAs, particularly rural ones, Jeremiah will tell you this too, they could only afford 3 or 4 meg of internet, maybe up to 10 or so, with how they were buying. And we knew there was a lot of latent demand there. We knew that they weren't fully utilizing the capabilities of digital learning, but we didn't know how much latent demand. And we just decided we're going to supply a 100 meg circuit to each one. By the end of this year, so 4 years later after the Connectivity Initiative, the 60's wrong. 75 of the 115 LEAs will have upgraded above that 100 meg circuit. So I think we were right. The proliferation of one-to-one, assessments moving more and more online. I'll talk about some of the things that are driving that, but it's really been, even exceeded our wildest expectations. 100 meg was probably, You know, looking at it now, 100 meg was the right way to start, but there was a lot of pent-up demand. I'll give you one example. You know, Edgecombe County, if anybody's from the east, they went 1-to-1 laptops in high schools last year. We immediately saw a nice kind of steady 30 meg demand pop to 300 right away. And that's still with all the content filtering, the SIPA and the FERPA regulations that you have to put in with K through 12. Just you can almost predict it. The other thing that's happened is in 2007, 2008, we were drawing down, our LEAs were drawing down somewhere around $25 million in federal E-rate funds, and I think everybody knows what E-rate is. It subsidizes connections for schools, and how much you receive is based on the number of children that you have in the school that are on free and reduced lunch. And we were drawing down about $25 million. We did some things administratively. We centralized the E-rate bureau within DPI. We created basically a consultancy. ITS put more investment into the E-rate portion. But then we gave everybody a big honking connection. And that big honking connection said that if you're going to utilize that network, your external facing connection to NCREM in the world at that 100 meg level, you're going to have to upgrade your internal network for the schools. And that's basically what E-rate funds. So today we're drawing down about 5 times the amount of E-rate funding that we did in 2007. It's one of our huge success stories, and it's the way that we've moved from, you know, inadequate connectivity at the school level to fairly adequate connectivity. Just wanted to show you this. When I got to MCNC, our peak load on the network, it was about 10 gig of traffic across the backbone on a daily basis. Somewhere around that, 8 to 10 gig.
NCAA tournament.
And I was going to mention what Jeremiah said. Today, actually, we've had days where we've crossed 40 gig. Normally, our biggest day of bandwidth use is the first day of the ACC tournament for basketball. So it's not all research traffic going across there. We see some bursts, though. You know, this is the same. You know, this same network that has now served the research needs of 2 Nobel Prize winners in the last 4 years. Also serves the production needs of the universities in K through 12 and others. So we're entertainment for the kids in their dorms at night. So what's driving this? Proliferation of devices. I read a study recently where the average college student needs a MAC address for 5 devices when they check in. 5 devices. So I want content anywhere to any device at any time while I'm within building or when I'm within the institution if it's a university. Second thing is virtual content. One of the goals of this program and the vision of Governor Perdue for this, why she was so adamant about it, was that she wanted a student anywhere across the state to have leveled access to content no matter where they were, right? We didn't want the fact that Wilkes County only had 1 qualified physics teacher to limit the number of students in Wilkes County who could take physics. We wanted to drive that virtual, and that's exactly what's happened. NCVPS continues to grow by about 15–20% per year, the North Carolina Virtual Public School, and some of those higher level classes. Assessment has moved more and more online in K through 12 and in the university system. And let me tell you, we're only scratching the surface because 45 states are moving towards something called the Common Core, where we're going to have a common curriculum across K through 12, and all the assessment's going to be online. This is a huge, huge bandwidth requirement that we're one of probably 3 states that are prepared for now. Research has increased, and research, you know, those 2 Nobel Prize winners are great examples. The Duke Award was multi-institutional. The UNC Award with Dr. Smithsees was multi-institutional. So research is happening now in the wide area. The NSF, NIH, others won't even look at a research grant now unless it's multi-institutional. And you got to have a network that connects those things together. And then finally, video. I mean, I've been with 2 college CIOs in the last couple days, and cable is going away on campus. Kids want time-shifted video. If you can come up with a virtual content server that gives kids Netflix and Hulu, they're done. They're done. They like this. And they don't really want to pay $12 a bed a month for a traditional cable package. You know, my 14-year-old son calls it wife time, because I don't want the wife time network. So that's where we are with those things. So fast forward a little bit to 2008, after we had all the LEAs and we're transitioning the community colleges to the backbone. Here's kind of the situation we were all facing. We were in an economic downturn. There was severe pressure on education budgets. And every one of the education leaders came to me and said, we can't pay you anymore for what you do. We are at our limit, and in fact, we need you to lower what you do. And, by the way, we're growing our bandwidth use at 30 to 40% per year, and that's not going to stop. So we're going to use you more, but we want to pay you less. An own network was the only way we could guarantee that we were going to be able to do this and serve the constituents that we found. And we found that as we looked across the entire footprint that we needed to serve, which was all 100 counties of North Carolina, there was no contiguous fiber available where we could own dark fiber. It was in fits and starts. You know, it was a disconnected road. If you've ever been to Dallas, they build highways before they actually need them, and you see things across the highway like a bridge will stop halfway across the highway. That's the way fiber looked in North Carolina, right? Certain people had built for certain needs to serve a constituent, but there was no contiguous fiber available statewide. There were a lot of gaps. So what happened? Well, there was a broadband stimulus program. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we went out and took responsibility for creating that contiguous fiber network. We raised about $40 million of private funding. Did not ask the state for any support funding. About $10 million of that's going to end up coming from our endowment. We did end up with about a $40 million endowment whose sole purpose is to take care of part of the capital needs of the network long term. So in other words, its sole purpose is to make sure that NCREN stays current, upgrading routing and switching. Now it's upgrading fiber and optics. But we run 2 rounds of funding. A total of $104 million of federal funding, about $40 million of private investment. And we started on a build that was pretty expansive. Touched 82 counties. It's 1,700 miles of new fiber and 900 miles of leases. One of the things that we said was if we found fiber that matched the route that we needed, we would IRU fiber from that entity. And so we've worked with Morris Broadband here in the West. We've worked with Blue Ridge Electric Membership Cooperative. We've worked with French Broad. We've worked with ERC. We've worked with Balsam West. So a lot in the West. The West, you know, when you look at what they did with Drake Industries and the Eastern Band and Congressman Taylor did with Balsam, it's amazing. It's amazing. And it kept jobs here, and it was really a model that we could follow as they looked around. So it was 1,700-mile new build, 900 miles of additional leases, and we basically started on 2 rounds of funding. And we've been leading the nation. So if you look at the blue line, that's basically what we have today. We're completely through with round 1, and most of that is in service. We finished about 8 months ahead of schedule, and we are about 80% of the way through round 2. About 1,200 out of 1,400, 1,300, about 1,150 or so miles of conduit is installed in round 2 out of 1,300 in new build. And we just finished up the last IRU agreement on round 2. We did things like, if you look at this, well, those of you from the East know what this is. Lake Mattamuskete's right about here. We actually built a route around Lake Mattamuskeet. Why? Because Hyde County Schools central office is right about there. Tracy and I have joked, would AT&T ever build a lateral like this? She goes, are you crazy? But we had to serve that school system at an equal level with the way that others were served in the state. What this basically gives us is a highway. It's a centralized highway that is built on serving those community anchor institutions, particularly those in education and healthcare, with as much bandwidth as they need and as much growth as they can do with fixed cost. That was the main reason for doing this. There is other capacity in that network statewide that private carriers can use to expand services in those areas. Now, the definition of expansion of services might be feeding fiber to a cell tower to implement 4G. And 4G may in fact become a rural broadband solution if you buy it in bulk and can get the right price points for those communities. It may be a super Wi-Fi carrier who comes in, there's models now across the country, who buys fiber from us for backhaul and access along those commercial capacities and starts to deploy in rural areas and can hit, you know, a $15 to $20 a month price point for unlimited use on that Wi-Fi network. The key is that for economic development, for rural broadband distribution, it's incumbent upon us now to build those partnerships that are going to move the ball forward beyond the community anchor institutions that we serve today. We took responsibility when we signed on for the grants for helping to build those partnerships.
Jay,
Yes.
can I ask you a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Dukeland, Lenore, Wayne,
Yeah.
Jackson.
Yeah.
Is one area that's not covered as are some others.
Yeah.
Any plans to try to fill that in down the road?
The only way we would be able to do that now, Philip, is if with private equity off of laterals or if there was business interest in it. And here's the way for a community in that area to start to work, I think, the best way forward. The first thing I would do is talk to your incumbent provider about can they leverage things that are nearby now to get cheaper backhaul and access to that. And then I would, as a community, start building the market for them. What else is there other than the community anchor institutions? Are there businesses there that are willing to sign on to a consortium to buy? Are there pockets of consumers development, multi-dwelling units? So communities that, and this goes for communities that are bisected in rural areas by the fiber as well. You've got to become a smart buyer. You've got to do the market research because the carrier, frankly, isn't going to come in and do that market research for you. That's an expense to them, and they've previously looked at the area and said there's not enough density. So you've got to look at that and kind of create the density for them. If you know about an economic development site that needs more bandwidth, add that to the mix. If you know about 3 or 4 housing developments that are going to cluster homes around, add that to the mix. If you know 2 or 3 enterprises that are struggling because they can't get enough service, add that to the mix. Do that market research and come together with that. Because the only way you're going to get infrastructure built is if they see a market there and they see a chance to get a return on it. Now, the solutions are becoming much more robust, right? We don't necessarily have to build fiber all the way to the premise in some of these areas to get high bandwidth, low latency service. But become a smart buyer. Become a smart buyer. Do the market research for them. Come together with the school system, come together with the economic development folks in Lenore County, come together with the business leaders, and create a smart market and a smart buyer for them. Tracy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, I was just nodding my head and agreeing on it.
Yeah.
You're right on.
Yeah, I think it's really, really, really important that we look at this no differently than we've looked at roads and water and sewer over time, right? We defined the need. We tied it to things that meant job growth or vitality for the community. And then we presented a package to those who had the market, or those who provided the service. It made sense. That's the way it's going to be today, but it's becoming, what we've done is we've taken some of what would have been the capital investment and taken it off the table. It's not even the majority share of the capital investment, because the last mile, you know, you're spending money 6, 7 to 1 to get to last mile in some cases from what we've done. But we have taken part of that off the table, and it may make it attractive to move into some areas. Does that make sense?
So I would suspect that we have the biggest fiber in Lenore County.
Yeah.
By far, bigger than what anybody else has done.
Yeah. So, and that's where we need to have discussions. If someone needs more of the share of business from you all in order to do economic development work, we'd sit down and talk. We've got to be smart about these things if we're going to solve the problem. So if we're going to solve the issue of access. And I'm not worried. I mean, you know, if you look at the surveys, to the standards that the FCC sets today, you know, we have 90+% access in North Carolina of rural broadband. That's what the surveys say. That there's 90+% access based on the speeds and feeds that the FCC say is a minimal standard of broadband today. What I'm worried about is the future, right? When we start putting health care, when we start putting more government services, when we start putting more education online, you know, 4 meg down and 1 meg up is not going to be a sufficient connection. And that's going to happen fairly quickly. So we not only have to think about what the standard is today, but we've got to think about what's the standard in 2015, what's the standard in 2020. You know, and the goal of the National Broadband Plan is 100 meg to 100 million homes by 2020. I look at that and say, I look at it the same way that, with the same skepticism we got when we did 100 meg to every LEA central office. The fact of the matter is, you know, 4 short years later, 75 of those LEAs are already ready to upgrade. Cumberland County Schools is going to be 2 gig. Now granted, they're doing some things from a bring your own device perspective and a bunch of other things that are really interesting and really forward thinking, but they're going to be 2 gig for a 50,000 student system. So, interesting. We've got to think about the future more. So what's the advantages for the commercial providers is what we've done. It's exactly what I've said. For the community anchor institutions we serve today, we have basically created a big, robust pipe that they can help deliver value-added services over. We can now start to think about things across K through 12 community colleges and the university system about a hosted IP voice service in the cloud. We can start to think about centralized anti-spam, antivirus content filtering solutions and centrally locating those. We can start to think about other applications, cloud delivering them versus point-by-point delivery that we do today. Some of those things are going to work well. There's going to be a transition period. Some of them aren't going to work well. But the key is the network is no longer going to be a limiting factor to pushing those things through. We have got enough capacity and a low latency network that we can start to think about some of these solutions. At MCNC, we've basically run a cloud-based video service for the last 15 years. We centralized the MDUs, we centralized all the gear, and basically the endpoints only have to buy the endpoint gear, rather than buying the whole infrastructure to serve video. So there's an opportunity here to serve the anchor institutions that we serve today with cloud services. We can also help the commercial last mile, as I mentioned. This is kind of gone. We are required by the federal government, by taking this grant, to run an open access network, which means that anybody that comes to us with an offer to buy fiber, we have to listen to. Okay? We set a price for fiber, which is very disruptive in the application. Our price is fixed, and in fact can only go down. So if somebody buys in quantity, we can actually lower that price. It's about $750 a strand, which in most areas, that's about a quarter of what the going rate is. And funds from fiber sales for us, that commercial capacity that we have on the network, can only go into the endowment. So they're only going to be used for the capital refresh needs of NCRAM. That's a stipulation that we all agreed to in the agreement. We won't directly serve businesses and consumers with internet service. That's not what we do. It's not in our articles of incorporation. And frankly, there are already people that do that much better than we do. We're not set up to do it. We're set up to run today a 400 endpoint network and getting highly technical people on the phone with our highly technical people and solving issues as they come up. It's a whole lot different than the consumer space. It's a whole lot different than the consumer space. We will not offer cloud-based applications to CAI where private sector providers are interested. We are not going to stand up our own voice service. We are not going to create our own content filtering application. We're going to look for best of breed and let them access the network to deliver those services to our end clients. So we're really going to push this as a way to partner and collaborate to get the best of breed services to our end partners. One of the things is I'm on the board of Internet2, which is the National Research Network. Internet2 has negotiated now national deals with 28 cloud service providers. And we can offer those to our community. We're one of 8 state networks that can actually offer those deals to our community and offer integration services on top of those. So it's really interesting to see where Internet2 is taking this stuff. You know, so if you had to define our mission when it came to fiber, we want to creatively work with service providers who want to access VTOP fiber to expand rural access. We want to share NC-REN bandwidth for free with providers who want to reach NC-REN connected CAIs with applications and services. So in other words, if AT&T has a hosted cloud voice solution and they feel more comfortable with those servers being in their data center, if they pay the cross-connect service to dump it onto the network, there's no cost for traversing the network for that service. Now, if in discussions with AT&T they want to use our data center space somewhere, if they want dedicated bandwidth to do it, we'd obviously have those discussions with them. And we use the VTOP network to help others grow revenue and create jobs. I've probably been now in about 25 economic development discussions with county and regional leaders who say, I need more bandwidth to X site. How can you help me? And it is a matter now, instead of a 200-mile build, it's a matter of a 3-mile lateral, which makes a lot more sense. And then what we do with that economic development site is we go back to our series of partners who are interested in fiber, whether that be a level 3 or a DukeNet or whatever, and say, hey, there's a lit service opportunity off this lateral. Do you guys want to buy fiber to serve it through the middle mile? And the answer in most cases has been, let's sit down and talk, because you're getting to a critical mass of these lit service opportunities, and it's time for us to buy fiber. And we're really creative. I said, you know, it's $750 a mile. Most of the time, IRUs, you have to pay all the money up front. So in other words, if you buy, you know, 1,000 miles of fiber at $750 a fiber mile, $750,000 comes up front in 2 payments. You get an initial payment, and then when you verify the veracity of the fiber, you get the second payment. With us, I can spread the payments over however long I want. So we can go to a carrier, we can go to a wholesale carrier and say, you know, pay us over 5 years. While you get your revenue streams coming in, we'll let you pay for the fiber. Because it's who we are. I don't care if I get the money in 2 years or 5 years. It all goes back into the endowment and serves the network. So this could be a real boom in some ways. Now I want to bring it more to you all. We serve a few county governments today, and there's a lot of interest. We're open to talking with others. Obviously, what we offer is transport and access. We buy internet in commodity at a multi-terabit rate. AT&T is our latest provider, and we hope to grow that connection greatly over time. Tracy hopes that too. We offer hosting services. We also offer occasional video, as I mentioned. What we mean by occasional video is that if you have one-offs on video conferences and things like that, we can do a permanent setup, but we can also offer, you know, kind of on-demand ad hoc. And we're looking at a lot of technologies that are a lot more personal. We have a flexible strategy. One of the things that we really like to do is partner with our providers on local circuits, and then help keep the costs down with internet. If you have locations where you want fiber built off the main route, we can help talk to you about those types of things and maybe get some creative folks to the table. We've been approached by at least 5 or 6 private equity firms that are willing to build laterals speculatively off the main route. So if a county or municipality is interested in that to serve administrative needs, that might make sense. We have a really, you know, we will be upfront with you. If we can't drive value for you and do things more efficiently than what they're done today, we'll tell you that. And our sweet spot is usually about 20 meg or more. That's where it makes sense to go to the backbone and take advantage of the pricing that we get for internet. So it's about 20 meg or more. Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that one.
Only that, we're having a lot of discussions. Our VTOP fiber build touches, I believe, 82 counties. And so many of your peers that are here at the conference were in active discussions about what makes sense and what opportunities there are. And, as Joe says, we're willing to look at any number of possibilities and kind of explore what those are and where they make sense.
So that's, this is obviously expansive. We want to see folks take advantage of it in several ways. You can put on your economic development hats as well as your service hats, but we're more than willing to sit and have conversations. And again, we want this to be leveraged in such a way that it's going to attract jobs to North Carolina, increase our economic vitality, and increase educational attainment. It took a lot of vision. I didn't mention two folks on the MCNC team, Pat Moody, who's our CFO, and Tommy Jacobson, who's our COO, have been dedicated to this project for the last 2.5 years. And they've done a fabulous job. I blew over a lot of the stuff, but the fact of the matter is we're held out for recognition in a very positive way, which is always good, by the feds on how we've implemented this. We had $140 million to work with. About 120 million of those are out the door. Most of them, the money's all capital. It went to companies like CommScope to buy fiber and conduit. Cisco is the optics provider. 3 out of the 5 construction companies were North Carolina based, and all of them hired North Carolina crew. And then the 2 engineering firms and the 1 law firm are all North Carolina based. So we really did what stimulus was supposed to do. I can't talk about the other $700 billion of stimulus funding, but I know that this $104 million from the feds was managed well. And we got the money out in the economy quickly, and folks in North Carolina benefited. So we're pretty proud of what we've done, and we want folks to take advantage of it. It was a risk, obviously, to go after this. We think it was a good calculated risk for North Carolina. Somebody was going to get this funding. It was highly competitive. There were 20 times the amount of requests that there were funding available, and we managed to count ourselves pretty well and win. And we feel pretty proud about that. So thank you all. I hope this was worthwhile, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions. And so is Brian. And I gave a PDF copy of the presentation to the NCLGISA folks, so I'm sure it'll be listed up. So, anything else? Well, thank you all. I hope it was worthwhile.
I would like to say from the K-12 vantage point, MCNC has been wonderful for you.
You get to work with the best guys, though, COD team. But we're glad to have that. And it's serving K through 12 is one of the proudest things we do. One of the proudest things we do. We've seen the ecosystem just flip because of how we've worked together, and we think that's tremendous. All right. Thank you all.